Before the sun rose over the English Channel on June 6, 1944, the fate of Western civilization rested in the hands of young American men who had never before seen combat on this scale. Men who had grown up during the Great Depression, who had worked farms, factory lines, and newspaper routes, who had listened to President Roosevelt on crackling radios and watched a world collapse into tyranny. That morning, as steel landing craft cut through dark, freezing water toward the coast of Normandy, they were not simply sailing toward a beach in France. They were sailing toward history's most heavily defended shoreline, toward an enemy who believed the Atlantic Wall was unbreakable, toward machine guns carefully zeroed to sweep every inch of sand. And yet, they went forward anyway, knowing that if they failed, Europe might remain under Nazi domination for a generation. By 1944, Adolf Hitler's Germany controlled vast portions of Europe. France had fallen. Belgium and the Netherlands had been overrun. The Soviet Union bled on the Eastern Front. Britain endured years of bombing but stood alone in the West. For 2 long years, the United States and its allies had prepared for one decisive moment: the invasion of occupied Europe. It would require an armada unlike anything the world had ever seen. More than 5,000 ships, thousands of aircraft, hundreds of thousands of troops. The planning alone took months of deception, misinformation, and strategic brilliance. Fake armies were constructed, false radio transmissions were broadcast, inflatable tanks were placed in England to mislead German intelligence. The success of the entire operation depended not only on courage, but on secrecy and precision. When the operation, codenamed Overlord, finally began, the scale was staggering. In the early hours of June 6th, American paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines under cover of darkness, scattered across the Norman countryside, tasked with disrupting communications and securing key bridges. Many landed miles from their intended targets. Some drowned in flooded fields. Others were captured within hours. But enough of them regrouped to create confusion among German forces, buying precious time for the invasion fleet moving steadily toward the coast. As dawn approached, the horizon filled with ships stretching farther than the eye could see. The largest amphibious assault in history was underway. The beaches had been divided into sectors: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. American forces were assigned to Utah and Omaha. Of the two, Omaha would become the most brutal. The men heading toward Omaha Beach sat shoulder to shoulder inside landing craft as artillery thundered in the distance. Many were seasick, most were silent. Officers tried to shout encouragement over the roar of engines and exploding shells. When the ramps dropped, the reality of war hit instantly. German machine guns positioned high on bluffs opened fire with devastating accuracy. The first waves were cut down in seconds. Some soldiers never made it off the ramps. Others stepped into water too deep, dragged down by heavy equipment. The beach became a killing zone of smoke, sand, and steel. For a time, chaos threatened to overwhelm the operation. Units were scattered, communication lines were broken. The carefully constructed invasion timetable dissolved in the face of relentless resistance. German defenses, protected by concrete bunkers and interlocking fields of fire, seemed impossible to penetrate. Casualties mounted rapidly. Bodies lay along the tide line as the sea continued to rise. And yet, amid that chaos, something extraordinary happened. Small groups of American soldiers began organizing themselves. Without waiting for perfect orders, sergeants gathered whoever was still standing. Engineers crawled forward under fire to blow gaps through barbed wire and beach obstacles. Naval destroyers risked running aground by moving closer to shore to provide direct fire support against German bunkers. Step by step, yard by yard, American forces pushed inland, climbing steep bluffs under constant gunfire. By midday, the tide of battle slowly shifted. German defenders, though fierce, were stretched thin and confused by reports of paratroopers behind their lines. As American troops gained higher ground, they were able to flank previously untouchable machine gun nests. The breakthrough did not come from a single dramatic charge, but from hundreds of acts of individual courage. Men moving forward despite terror, medics running into open fire to treat the wounded, officers leading assaults knowing survival was unlikely. Meanwhile, at Utah Beach, American forces met lighter resistance and advanced more quickly than expected. Though landings occurred slightly off target, quick thinking by commanders turned potential disaster into opportunity. Within hours, inland objectives were being secured. The western flank of the invasion began stabilizing. By nightfall on June 6th, more than 150,000 Allied troops had landed in Normandy. Thousands were dead or wounded, but the beachhead held. The Atlantic Wall, once thought impenetrable, had been breached. Hitler's forces, stunned by the scale of the invasion, struggled to mount a coordinated counterattack. Critical hours were lost as German high command debated whether the Normandy landings were the main assault or a diversion. That hesitation proved fatal. D-Day did not end the war. What followed were weeks of brutal hedgerow fighting, tank battles, and relentless aerial bombardment. The campaign in Normandy would last months and cost tens of thousands more lives. But strategically, June 6th marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. It forced Hitler to fight a two-front war at full scale. It accelerated the liberation of France. It restored hope to occupied nations that freedom was not a distant dream, but an approaching reality. For the United States, D-Day became more than a military operation. It became a defining moment of national identity. It demonstrated that a democratic nation, slow to mobilize but immense in industrial and moral power, could project force across an ocean and challenge one of the most formidable war machines in history. The invasion required not only bravery from soldiers, but unity at home. Factories operating around the clock, families enduring rationing, women entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers. A society committed to a common cause. Today, the beaches of Normandy are peaceful. Waves roll gently where artillery once thundered. Rows of white crosses and stars of David overlook the sea in solemn symmetry. They mark the resting place of young Americans who never returned home, who never saw the peace they helped secure. They were not professional warriors raised for conquest. They were citizens called to defend an idea, the idea that tyranny should not dominate the future of mankind. June 6, 1944, stands as proof that even in the darkest chapters of human history, resolve and sacrifice can alter the course of the world. It was not flawless. It was not bloodless. It was not simple, but it was necessary. And in that necessity, a generation answered history's call